No sound. 1, 2, and 2. 1, 2, and 2.
Okay, we'll start now.
Awesome.
So, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Energy transition. Energy security and energy transition. Energy security. Yeah, ready to go. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our wonderful event, the Africa Europe Foundation event, partnership with the European Commission, with the African Union Commission. We welcome you this afternoon. I'm seeing long faces and I'm wondering why are we having long faces when the two beautiful continents are meeting this afternoon, Africa and Europe together. My name is Valinabo Kavagari, and because people, they always butcher my name, I'm going to volunteer to butcher other people's names today. So you can call me Vali. I'm a senior fellow for adaptation for the Africa Europe Foundation and also the country representative for the International Union for Conservation of Nature in South Africa, IUCN. For this wonderful event, we are joined by our wonderful and very important dignitaries here. But allow me firstly to give thanks to the key organizers for this particular event, the European Union Commission, which was also in partnership with the African Union Commission, Ministry of Environment and Forestry in Kenya. We have got Federal Ministry for Social Community Cooperation and Development, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Netherlands, and other key organizers, including the Africa Europe Foundation. To begin this wonderful event, I would like to request my panelists to just for a moment to stand for a photo shoot before we get going, and then I will do the intro, and then we can get going, and then we can allow other people to come through. Please, just for a few. We are looking great, aren't we? And we are smiling. I'm sure all of us we are smiling here. Why are we? Please.
I dress up for this.
Definitely, this wonderful moment. Okay, I hope we've captured all this moment. Allow my panelists to take their seats.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, so that we can get started with our discussion this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very interesting event which we welcome you to. It's a joint conversation whereby we are talking about the Africa-Europe partnership. We are talking about the opportunities that are being presented. But we are doing this at the back of the build-up that we have created. When we walked away from COP26, we knew for a fact that when we come to COP27, it's not going to be an easy COP. However, the two continents sat down and decided how best do we address and prepare for COP27? And more importantly, how do we prepare ourselves to deal with climate change adaptation issues? This resulted in the Africa-Europe Summit in February 2022 this year. Within that particular summit, there were a lot of developments, there were a lot of engagements, there were a lot of agreements that were developed. One of the critical ones is to say, how does Africa and Europe enhance their partnership in the face of the changing climate? We know very well the IPCC report, what they say about the interlinkages on the environment, climate change, biodiversity, and the land. and most importantly, the socio-economic elements that we're actually talking to today. However, today we also know very well the importance of adapting to climate change and building resilience as an essence of responding to the ever-changing impacts of climate change. Africa and Europe, they are not spared in that element. Africa and Europe, they are always having conversations because of that. Africa and Europe, they need programs to be able to talk to that. This brings us to the conversation that we're having today. While we are meeting here today, we are joined with the higher level segment, wherein we're going to have very great speakers, as I've indicated. Allow me to introduce to you one of our very great speakers who will be leading this conversation this afternoon. As part of the conversation, one of the key issues is that we want to allow the conversation to be a higher level segment. Not only do we talk about policies, but allowing ministers to lead this conversation. And we do have people who are actually going to assist greatly in terms of unpacking the programs and the projects that needs to be done on the ground. More important, in addition to that, we do have got partners who are ensuring that the conversation of Africa-Europe partnership, adaptation and resilience find its home. Hence the initiative that we're going to talk to today, which talks about the Team Europe initiative. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to request my two panelists who are going to be providing the keynote speaker for this discussion. Firstly, allow me to welcome Frans Timmermans. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and let me acknowledge what you're saying. It's a difficult COP, but has there ever been a COP that was easy? Not in my experience. So it's all part of what we need to do. But what I want to talk today about is the challenges we face together. Every day we are reminded about the grave impacts of the climate crisis. You know, Africa has seen incredible droughts, incredible floods. East Africa is now suffering from a terrible drought. You've had the locust infestations. You've had coastal degradations at levels that are incredible. You see desertification causing levels of migration that are causing tensions then in other countries. I mean, it is clear this is a challenge Africa can face, but it can't face it alone. And I think we need to make sure this burden is shouldered by all of us. We did a lot of work last year in Glasgow, but the honest truth is that the world is not on track to keep the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. We need more ambition, we need more action on all fronts of the Glasgow Climate Pact: adaptation, climate finance, and definitely also mitigation. We at the EU, we're ready to go beyond what we had previously indicated. Now, we had said we would reduce our emissions by 55% by 2030. I can now say that we will be at least 57% due to the legislation we have agreed with the countries represented in the Council and the European Parliament. This, of course, is, as the Presidency has said, an implementation COP, and this is the time to deliver. It is also an Africa COP, an adaptation COP. Adaptation is a global issue with different needs in different regions. Africa has contributed least to where we are today, yet many of the countries on this continent are among the most vulnerable to climate change and are suffering more than many other places. So we need to step up our game for adaptation in Africa. Finance for adaptation and disaster risk reduction must be mobilized at greater speed and scaled significantly to the needs of the African continent. We have a work program for the global goal on adaptation, and we should build on that to be ready for next year's stocktake. The EU and its member states have been a steadfast partner and a consistent, reliable donor of climate finance. Last year again, our joint contributions surpassed $27 billion. This contribution has been greatly increased in recent years, more than doubling since 2013. More than half of it is now dedicated to either adaptation or projects that support both adaptation and mitigation. Still, we know that we too can do more and that we can do better to support vulnerable countries, and we take that responsibility. That is why I am happy to announce at this event that, together, the European Union and 4 member states, France, Germany, the Netherlands and Denmark, will provide over 1 billion euros to support adaptation in Africa. Together with our partners in the African Union Commission, and I salute Commissioner who is here with us tonight, this initiative brings together existing and new adaptation programs and ensures coordinated delivery on the ground. This 1 billion initiative is a starting point. Other member states can join, and we also encourage development banks to join. The Team Europe approach means more money and money better spent. To go in a little more detail, the initiative does 4 things. First, we will support collection and analysis of climate risk data. Then we will reinforce early warning systems, both at regional and national level, and support other crucial initiatives like Antonio Guterres' Early Warning for All initiative. Third, we will support the development of multi- and single-country proposals to mobilize international climate finance, including from the private sector. To tackle the climate crisis, we need a shift of trillions, not billions, and we cannot do that with public funding alone. And fourth, but even with the best planning, disasters may not always be avoidable. Therefore, the 4th pillar of the initiative will strengthen climate and disaster risk finance and insurance mechanisms to protect vulnerable populations against climate hazards. You know, the hot topic this week is loss and damage. Some of the money announced today by the European Union and its member states will go to addressing loss and damage as well. You know the pledges that have already been done in this respect by some of our member states and also those who are not part of today's initiatives. Today, the European Union will add 60 million euros to that from our common budget. The EU will not stop there. The climate finance target for our main global budgetary program has been raised to 35%. And we intend to raise further investments for clean, secure and climate-resilient infrastructure. The Green Great Wall, the EU-African Union Transboundary Water Management Initiative and strategic corridors, to name a few. Member states present today have also many other ongoing initiatives. So you see that we have tools, funds, mechanisms to deliver financial assistance now and to move it quickly. So let me end by saying what I think we need to do to move forward at this COP in the next couple of days. First, we need to be able to trust each other. I hope that the European Union has earned by now your trust. We are the biggest donor of climate finance, we have a highly ambitious NDC and we are implementing it, and we're seriously considering all the proposals on the table this week from different parties. But we need to realize that we live in 2022 and not in 1992. And we cannot have future funding based on ideas and economic realities of 30 years ago. We need to take into account the economic situations of countries now when we address their responsibilities and not of where those countries were 30 years ago. There are many countries that require support and many more than can give it. That's a good thing. It shows how much economic development the world has seen in the past 30 years. To tackle the climate crisis and all that goes with it, such as loss and damage, we need a mosaic of solutions. And we will present some ideas today on how to take the talks forward in a more realistic way than some of the proposals we've seen floated so far. I keep saying that we are here to build bridges. I hope that we can build this bridge and find that from the other side, the same effort has been made in the meantime. My goal is to get finance going now, not in years' time. And my goal is to make sure this finance is targeted to the most vulnerable and not spread out evenly on all countries that, based on the 1992 figures, would be eligible. We need to focus on the countries that are most vulnerable. We need to do this now, and we can do this now if we come together on a compromise I hope we can find. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will have to excuse the commissioner because he's got other engagements that we'll be getting into. A very interesting indication there in terms of finance. Very interesting conversation with regard to where we need to go, and I think they are becoming more and more clear. Now, let's go and hear from Africa. We're going to call upon the Commissioner of Infrastructure from Africa. As we know very well that loss and damage issues, adaptation issues, the capacity in terms of adaptation will have to do with energy and infrastructure as well. So it's important that we also bring this conversation together. It's a cross-cutting issue where I need to ensure that we have got that discussion happening today. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to COP27, Sharm-el-Sheikh, Egypt, Africa. I hope you are having a good time. I would like to start by welcoming you all, thanking the Europe-Africa Foundation, but most importantly also greeting our counterparts and colleagues from the European Union Commission and their excellencies, ministers here present, but all of you as well. The African Union is, and the European Union are all partners. Actually, the European Union is our closest and older partner, and it is not surprising that this important event is jointly prepared. Climate adaptation and resilience has been a broader topic in all the discussion in this COP, as you know, and is being considered at all levels by global, regional, and national policymakers. It is therefore an honor for me to be here to witness this important event and the initiative that His Excellency Timmermans just launched on the climate change adaptation and resilience in Africa. For both Africa and Europe, a low-carbon, climate-resilient future is at the top of the political and development agenda for different but mutual reasons. For Europe, a transition to low-carbon development will sustain economic growth while at the same time meeting climate change mitigation objectives. For Africa, a low-carbon future provides the best opportunities for us for addressing a wide range of development issues, including accelerating economic growth and transformation, poverty reduction, rural development, job creation, as well as avoiding future carbon emissions. Over the last 2 decades, Africa and Europe had several successful collaborations and partnerships in strategic areas that include mobilization of financial resources, technical assistance, as well as implementation of projects and programs. In our commission, the African Union Commission, we are pleased with our collaboration and partnerships with the European Union in implementing several of our key programs. The EU and the EU member states have been providing technical and financial assistance in the implementation of various programs within the African Union, and especially in the department that I have the honor to head, infrastructure energy. I mean, be it the infrastructure development program for Africa, the EU-Africa Energy Partnership, the geothermal risk mitigation facility in Eastern Africa, and even the African single electricity market, which is poised to be the largest electricity market in the world by 2040. The EU has also seconded experts and the technical expertise to the departments and the sectors in which we operate. So it's no surprise that today we are witnessing yet another very important initiative geared to the specific elements of climate. Now, while the collaboration partnerships have been successful in the development of policies, strategies, and action plans, there is a significant need to strengthen our partnership, the partnership between the two continents, to ensure effective implementation of concrete projects, of concrete actions. Recent global events and agenda have also highlighted the need to nurture, protect, and build upon our mutual and beneficial partnership. And after all, this COP is all about implementation. Excellencies, distinguished participants, currently, Africa stands out as the most vulnerable region to the impacts of climate change, despite accounting for only 3% of the global GHG emissions. The consequences of climate change are more marked and more severe in our region, in our countries, due to their inability to meet the costs of vulnerability and adaptation. Climate change continues to impact negatively on key areas and sectors in our continent, Africa, including agriculture and food security, water supply, healthcare, energy, and regional security, biodiversity, and so many other things. Therefore, adaptation and resilience to climate change has to be the priority for all of us and also for all the partners who are working with us and with our governments. Over the years, several pledges and commitments were made, while several financing mechanisms were also established with a view to assist developing countries build resilience and adapt to the impacts of climate change. For Africa, the time for action is now. Given the huge financing needs for adaptation and mitigation in our continent, it is clear that international support will be needed to complement domestic efforts. That is why I am very pleased with the launch of the Team Europe initiative on adaptation and climate resilience. I strongly believe that the support from this initiative on climate change adaptation resilience will bring more hope for Africans and pave ways to find new solutions, strategies, and opportunities that will support our continent to address growing adaptation and disaster risk reduction needs. Excellencies, distinguished participants, I would like to stress that this initiative should focus on strengthening existing partnerships while also focusing on implementation of concrete projects in the following areas: mobilizing financial and capital markets to leverage financing for climate resilience and adaptation. I must say I did not read the speech of His Excellency Timmermans, but it so happens that we were maybe agreeing on so many things that he said. Focusing on the implementation priority and highly impactful projects at the regional, national, and local levels. Targeting investments towards vulnerable communities and areas, especially rural areas, as well as promoting business opportunities for women and youth. Technology cooperation and technology transfer of crucial systems that will with low carbon and climate resilient growth. Enhancing capacity of institutions on how to integrate climate resilience into development projects. This requires both continents to map and harmonize already existing platforms and partnerships between the two continents to set out clearer targets and action plans that will help accelerate adaptation and climate resilience actions. Once again, I would like to thank the European Union for their continued and fruitful engagement with Africa, and thank you all for listening to this. And I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Commissioner. Once again, I'm going to make an apology as well for the Commissioner. She'll be off to other events. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us some of those high-level inputs and also ensuring that the landscape and the understanding and the connectivity between the EU Commission and the Africa Commission is very clear to all of us. In addition to that, I think now the question is what, where, when, and how. Because while all this talk is happening, we need to we need to have a pin where we pin down all these key activities, projects, programs, ideas. Timmerman made mention of the fact that we need to start talking and we need to have open conversations. And this is where the technocrats comes in. and they have to start punching numbers, identifying ideas, co-designing, thinking together, which is something that is really required to ensure that we can build on this Africa-Europe partnership for adaptation and resilience. From there, colleagues, allow me to then switch a little bit. I'm going now into the different countries which are going to be sharing their views and perspective about this Africa-Europe partnership and also this initiative that has been launched today, looking at how we can be able to strengthen this and how these different countries can actually support this work that is happening. Let me switch already to the State Secretary of Germany, Johann Vlachbach, who's going to join us and share with us in terms of why does Germany see this as a very good opportunity to play a very big role in the partnership, and also what do they see in this partnership that is important to support the Africa-Europe partnership. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, really happy to be here at this event when, as Wally said, the two lovely continents meet each other. Let me start by saying last year in Glasgow at the COP, I think it was a turning point. We spoke a lot about adaptation already prior to this COP, but last year we took really serious decisions. And one was the decision to double adaptation finance by 2025. There was another request in the room, and we were pushed by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, that we should seek to balance adaptation and mitigation finance, 50 by 50. And I'm happy to say, before I look at the African continent, that Germany in 2021, the first time, more or less reached the balance. We spent 49%, 2.6 billion public finance, climate finance for adaptation and 51 for mitigation. So it's more or less half. Looking now into the African continent, what we are doing there, the 2021 figures count to 700 million euros for adaptation, which is more than the half compared to mitigation. And rightly so, looking at a continent with so little emissions, of course the focus needs to be, on the one hand, to allow the economic growth, the creation of welfare in a climate-friendly way, and to do a lot on adaptation to avoid that we have to do even more on loss and damage. Because the more we fail on mitigation, the more we fail on adaptation, the more we have to equal on loss and damage. And let me now say a few words about the Team Europe initiative, because I think it's a very essential progress we are exercising between Europe and our African partners. I worked prior to the last COP, together with my Canadian colleague and friend Jonathan Wilkinson on the 100 billion delivery plan. And I don't want to speak about the numbers, but I want to speak about some insights I got from that. And that is not only the quantity of finance is relevant, it's also about the quality. And that is a share of mitigation and adaptation, but it is also about the accessibility for our partners to this finance. I think one very important prerequisite is that the so-called donors, I always hesitate a little bit, it's a strange word, huh? That they have to much better coordinate themselves and to streamline their support. And that is what we are doing with the Team Europe initiative. It is that we make more out of the money we have, so that the member states, Franz Timmermans quoted, that the European Commission make a coordinated offer to collaborate with our African partners. And that is something desirable for all our future cooperation. And let me add that, of course, also on the side of the African continent, we appreciate very much the role of the African Union, also of the Africa Adaptation Initiative, which plays an increasingly important role for the facilitation and channeling of the finance. And therefore, I was privileged to announce already a bit prior, not this evening, in this COP, another 5 million euros from Germany for this initiative. And just to finalize, what we are having here on the table now, the finance Franz Timmermans announced. This is not the end. Of course, and fair enough, our African partners expect more from us. And during the time when this manuscript was written from my team, and now we were able to get another 40 million from our parliament for the African Development Fund adaptation window, and I think that is the progress we need.
Thank you so much. That sounds very exciting. There's quite a lot of opportunities that are being shared. Very interestingly, they are all increasing the climate finance. They are all talking about making availability, the opportunities to talk to the different institutions, to exchange information. The modalities to do this remains the most important element. The modalities on how we can be able to bypass those processes remains key. We found out in our discussion as the working group for adaptation that finance for adaptation and the challenges thereof remains obstacles. That means we need to get our technocrats to assist us greatly on how to unlock those opportunities so that the numbers that are there make sense to all of us. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to move swiftly to call upon my colleague and the DG of African Union Commission to share his thoughts with regard to the perspective of African Union Commission on this wonderful initiative and the partnership thereof. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon / almost good evening, everybody, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here and sharing with you some thoughts about the subject that is gathering us. And I would like, first of all, because I think it is worth underlining it, to congratulate Egypt for convening such a strategic COP and at such a timely moment. It is indeed a COP for all, but it is a COP for Africa. It is a COP for action. It is a COP for implementation. And it is a COP for partnerships. And this is what we are here about. Allow me to just remind all that, of course, climate change is affecting every country and community at varying scale, and we have seen it throughout these days. However, Africa is hugely and disproportionately affected because of its high vulnerability, exposure, and low coping capacity. Over the years, the African Union has been on the forefront in developing relevant policies and instruments to support its member states in adapting to climate and disaster risk. These include the Africa Regional Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Program of Action for the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030. Integrated Africa Regional Strategy for Meteorology, African Union Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy and Action Plan 2022-2032, which was adopted recently, Africa Institutional Framework for Multi-Hazard Early Warning and Early Action System and its Delivery Program, the Africa Multi-Hazard Early Warning and Early Action System Program. These instruments, these tools, in addition to the one that Commissioner Amani Abu Zaid just mentioned earlier, have been developed with an active and continued collaboration with the European Union. Within the framework of the AU-EU partnership, the EU Commission has been implementing key programs on the continent to translate implementation of these policies into action on the ground. Some of these programs include MESA and CLIMSA programs, the program Building Disaster Resilience to Natural Hazards in Sub-Saharan African Region, and its program Strengthening Disaster Risk Governance for Resilience in African Region and Countries, 2022-2026. GCCA Plus and other sectors include wildlife, sustainable land management, water and environment, and Vice President Timmermans mentioned the Great Green Wall through existing EU initiative within the framework of the EU-AU Special Program. The African Union welcomes very much the new EU initiative under the Team Europe on adaptation and resilience. This is not only a timely initiative that will enable Africa to implement concrete programs on adaptation and disaster risk reduction, but it also ushers a new way of doing business that will ease coordination and facilitate greater impact. I believe that the word impact is really what gathers us now at this COP and beyond. The success of the Africa-Europe Adaptation Partnership will be achieved with a partnership that is owned by both parties and implemented by all stakeholders and key actors. Building on the necessity of full ownership by both sides in respect of the spirit of our partnership, it is critical that the joint African-Europe action on adaptation and resilience be based on common and shared priorities. We look forward to working with all in designing the initiative in a way that ensures orderly and inclusive engagement of African stakeholders and our partners in the design and implementation of the initiative. In conclusion, I would like just to recall that we have an upcoming commission-to-commission meeting that is scheduled in a few days on the 28th of November. And this moment will represent a great opportunity to advance and deepen the discussions regarding Africa-Europe Adaptation Partnership. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking on behalf of the commissions and also for speaking on behalf of Germany. We really appreciate this and also the inputs to ensure that we are actually moving. And there's a very greater need to emphasize the institutional arrangements, partnership, and also COP for partnership. Having said that, I'm now wondering, how do we then get the other countries on board to assist us in terms of unlocking these opportunities? I'm now wondering, how is Africa getting ready to play a critical role in this partnership? We've heard from the EU, we've heard from the African Union Commission. We want to hear more from the countries. Let me call upon the minister from Zambia, Chipolopolo, Honorable the Engineer Collins Nzovu, to take the floor. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here as well. When I hear everybody speak, I ask myself, this is an implementation COP. What does implementation as far as adaptation mean? I received 2 reports when I came here, one from the IPCC. The results from there obviously are that Africa will be devastated if we do not carry on the path to 1.5. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, what does this mean for Africa? It means that the food systems, the water systems, the energy systems will be disturbed. The very means of production and consumption have to change with changing times. I'm very excited, but maybe before the excitement, the other report I got hold of was the finance report. And the finance report, particularly on adaptation, is very clear that we're not doing enough. And the assertion that we must not leave anybody behind is failing us. What do we need to do? Obviously, one of them is to see how we reform our financial institutions, how we give more financing, cheaper financing, concessional financing, how we ensure that MDBs are reformed. I'm very, very excited for your information listening to the EU, and we value this partnership. So when I hear 1 billion euros is on the floor for this partnership, my feelings are mixed. There are 2. One is of great excitement. The other one is a bit of worry. Are we moving fast enough is this financing quality financing? Are we going to touch it? Coming from COP26 to now, it's been a year. There have been promises before. Is Africa ready? Of course we are ready. If there's anything which taught me that when the world comes together, we can resolve this issue, and there's enough financing in the world, it's COVID-19. It devastated all of us. We came together and resolved it. When I look at climate financing, it's so difficult to touch. The question will be, that's $1 billion. As I say, I heard Commissioner Timmermans say, there will be data collection, there will be disaster risk, there will be everything. And these projects may take 2, 3, 4 years to actualize. My call to the EU is that everything you are doing is spot on. We appreciate what you are pledging. But can we make it easy? Can we start moving? Africa is ready. If talking for my country, Zambia, other than the concession and loans and the private sector, we are ready to move. The money is safe. Even private financing, we are ready. We have what is called a public-private partnership dialogue, where we sit down and break all barriers to trade. For us, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is a matter of survival. You are talking about a continent which has contributed less than 4% of the emissions, but a continent which suffers the most. But this is also a continent where the cost of financing is so high. If this is not leaving us behind, then what is it? Our call to everybody, to you yourselves here, is to ensure that we come together, hand-hold us to move with you, or else you are not only leaving us behind, you are flying away. I'll be able to contribute more. Thank you for kind attention.
Minister, you make a very important point about accessibility, about what needs to be done on the ground, which is very key, because when we come in the next 4 or 5 years, we must be able to showcase what has been happening on the ground, so that this conversation does not only remain a talk show, but becomes an implementation and a movement conversation. Your Royal Highness, we would love to hear what is the contribution of the Netherlands to this Africa-Europe initiative. We would like to hear more about what does it mean, where to from here. And as you have heard, the minister is saying he's excited, but he's also worried. We want to live here all excited, but worried because when the Africa-Europe Summit takes place, they must worry about how this initiative is going to be implemented. Over to you, Your Highness.
Well, thank you very much, and I am very excited to be here with you, and thank you very much for your points, and I think those are the points to discuss. Since last Glasgow, we said we needed to implement, and I've seen that many countries have shifted their focus, because this is an Africa Cup, adaptation COP, and I've seen that we heard Mr. Timmermans right now, and also the Netherlands and many countries here, France, Germany, Denmark, are really pushing and seeing, can we really listen to Africa and can we respond to it? So if you look at the quantity, the Netherlands has upped its climate finance from 1.2 billion euros to 1.8 leading up to 2025. Half of that is mitigation, half of that is already adaptation. Our adaptation in this scale-up is going to double. All of our adaptation finance is grant-based. So you're talking about access, and that grant-based should be either direct or should leverage other finance to come that can't take the risk. So that's our approach. And so we talk about the quantity, we talked about the quality, and then the accessibility. We are really, the majority of the funds, what we're discussing of the Netherlands, is going to Africa. So it's going to you. And you said also, what many people don't know, is if you take a loan for a wind park or for other projects in Africa, the cost of financing it is multiple the cost of doing the same thing in Europe. So you're right, it is a big challenge. And there are new investment mechanisms coming with the Green Climate Fund and others that we're trying to overcome this issue. But there is an extra cost of doing business in Africa and other parts of the world that we need to tackle. So I'm hearing you. And about implementation of this COP, the first thing that we announced on day 2 of the COP was to deliver, the Netherlands delivering additional 100 million euros to the Accelerated Africa Adaptation, or AAAP program, to really accelerate specifically this thing. It's going through the African Development Bank directly. So that received a lot of praise from a lot of African leaders saying, thank you, we were very worried before this COP, but things are moving in that direction. And the second is that we're focusing, we're significantly going to contribute to the disaster preparedness and early warning action. To move from global awareness to local action on avoidance of impact and to be able to react fastly. And we're going to strengthen the social safety nets, so insurance schemes, to build resilience against climate-induced events and have rapid payouts. And that's where we will be seeing how we can support the Africa risk capacity, the gentleman sitting next to me, going forward. And that's on the adaptation side. But I think we should not forget that we are doing a lot of things on the mitigation side on Africa as well, because getting access to finance there is quite a challenge. On the same day where we announced the AAAP donation, we invest 40 million euros in Namibia for the hydrogen development. And that's a first loss investment. That's the high risk, so that they can attract other finance that can't take the same risk. And that fund should lead up to $1 billion of investment into Namibia, green energy development, hydrogen development, and then we'll have a partnership with Namibia to also have the potential to import green hydrogen into Europe, but making sure that first Namibia benefits, then South Africa benefits from the extra energy, but only then export it to Europe and have a good partnerships, equal partnerships on both sides. And so I'm proud to be a part of the Team Europe initiative, and that we can really strengthen Africa, EU, and be the credible partner, but increase partnership going from now on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Highness. I'm tempted to go back to Paris to now understand how is France contributing to this adaptation and resilience in Africa, and how will this initiative serve as an umbrella for many other initiatives or for demonstration? Because we have seen multiple initiatives that are being launched. We've seen Nature Africa, Green Deals, Great Green Wall, Great Blue Wall. What more? How is France planning to respond to this? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's really good that we're talking about adaptation in Africa at an African COP. So it's very, very timely. First of all, just to say that France is really serious about climate finance. We're putting 6 billion euros a year, including 2 billion for adaptation, 2.2 billion, in fact, last year in 2021. Of that, about almost 40% goes to Africa. And so we have these big projects in mitigation, in adaptation. We have also small targeted programs, such as the adaptation facility, which helps African country with technical assistance to develop their adaptation strategies. And because it's so important to know what you need, to assess the needs, and then to enter the country with the knowledge of what is needed. But thank goodness we haven't waited for this initiative to work together. Jaime was mentioning in particular the AAAP, the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program. Congratulations on the Netherlands for launching this very important program, in which the France participates. We put in 10 million euros as seed money into this, and it's going to be seed money because it will allow our development agency, AFD, to really work with the Global Center on Adaptation to see what projects we can do on the ground and mobilize the billions that I mentioned in the earlier part of my intervention. And then we have things what EVP Timmermans was mentioning is as part of the priorities of this common initiative that we have. One is early warning systems. You know, we work hand in hand with countries like Germany, with the Netherlands, on the climate risk and early warning system, which we launched at COP21, and which is an extremely efficient initiative which has delivered on the ground in many countries in Africa, and which will gain influence in the wake of the initiative of the UN Secretary General to have by 2027 all populations covered by the energy system. And then we have the Global Shield, which Germany defended and presented as part of the G7, which we support. We announced 20 million for the Global Shield on financial risk. There is a lot to be done in that respect to find the right financial tools, the risk instruments to make sure that people on the ground are well covered. The Africa risk capacity, which France has also been supporting from the start. So there's a lot of things that we already do together, which is great, and there's so much more we can do together, and that's the whole point of this initiative, because we know each other well already. KfW and IFD have long-standing relations. Just one example, where in South Africa, as part of the JETP program, we're putting in together at the same time a joint loan of 600 million, and that's KfW and IFD. So lots of projects that we can do together, which this initiative can muster. Thank you.
Thank you so much. While we are at that, let's also think that what are some of the initiatives that we're going to take into this conversation in the Africa-Europe Summit and the modalities. So therefore, we need champions who are going to lead this conversation to make sure that when we come back again, we're not repeating this conversation again. When we come back, when we meet again, we'll be talking about the roadmap. What are the activities that we've actually outlined to ensure that in the Africa-Europe Summit, this is the outcome, this is the agreement, this is what we need to be looking at, and also ensuring that the programs are developed. My brother is smiling here for only one good reason. Please, over to you, my brother.
Thank you very much. The nice thing about being last person to speak is I agree with everything that's been said so far. And the reason why I agree with everything that's been said so far, everyone on this panel has a role to play in my organization, starting with Zambia, who chairs the Conference of the Parties of our member states. France has been supporting us. The African Union will part of the AU Summit, AU African Union. Germany has been supporting us, and a new partner we have to our right. So you can imagine how excited I am to be here, to see our partners doing the talking on our behalf, as opposed to me saying how great we are. I have to admit, I was just about to leave town without hearing the big numbers. So to hear $1 billion on the table as a commitment, that's exactly the news I wanted to hear before I leave Sharm-el-Sheikh. And may I ask you just to give a big round of applause to the EU for the support. Just think for a second, if we can get that kind of commitment from different partners, we'll go a long way in addressing loss and damage. And let's hope by the time the COP is over, the numbers will go to 6 billion, 10 billions, will reach the 100 billions we've been talking about. So to me, the first message to say, that commitment fits with the overall framework and ambition and doing something about loss and damage, and that's something to be saluted as far as the EU is concerned. Let me make 3 quick points. Number 1, the point I'm about to make is on behalf of Africa, and talk about the problem as we see it in Africa. Talk about where we see the demand in intervention now that we got the money. And then third, what would it take to be successful as far as Africa is concerned? As far as the problem is concerned, disaster risk management in Africa, it has a face. It has a human face. And that is to say, what is it? Drought, tropical cyclone, and flood. It affects the livelihood of many Africans across the continent. So therefore, for us, it's not just a talk. It's about survival. It's about protecting life and livelihood, because many Africans are affected by drought, affected by food insecurity. So therefore, what we're doing here at COP27 will have an impact a long way in addressing the needs of Africans who are affected by disaster. It's important to have that in the back of our mind to understand what I call the human face of climate change. But for us to be successful, there are a couple of things that need to happen. First, leadership. And that is why I'm delighted to have the African Union here, because the African Union is leading the way in making sure other partners will join the African Union to see African solution to African problems and a strategic partnership with other players to make sure we can be part of the solution. And then second, to have also what I call a strategic alignment with what the African Union wants to do. And that's why my organization, everything that we do, fits within the overall disaster management, climate change strategy of the African Union, so that we don't get actually sidetracked and be focused on what the African Union wants to do. And that's why alignment is extremely important. Now, if I look at the demand, what do we have needs as far as Africa is concerned, based on our experience? Twofold. Number one, we're talking about understanding the needs in a way that we can actually profile the risk and the exposure of Africa to disasters. And here, the number one need is, how do we profile the risk? How do we have access to data? How do we understand to modeling what is that we're dealing with? And that is why the early warning system for Africa is extremely critical. That's how we can build the capacity of African countries to understand the magnitude of the problem before we even talk about solutions. So therefore, when it comes to early warning systems, when it comes to contingency planning, capacity building, what the Africans are saying, let's make sure the early warning system, technology and data and modeling are accessible to Africans so we can actually understand the problem before we talk about the solutions. Second, in Africa, it is also important to my organization, we support the African to transfer the risk to the insurance market so we can mobilize additional resources to make sure that the first response of African governments come from the insurance market so we can save life and livelihood. And here, our biggest challenge is the affordability and the accessibility and the availability of premium finance. And that is why we commend the Global Shield as an initiative whereby access to premium financing will be made available. So African government will want to transfer the risk to the insurance market, have access to additional resources to be able to actually have the resources required and the subsidies required to transfer the risk to the insurance market. So hopefully the Global Shield will be accessible enough, combined with the initiative of the European Union, so we can support the African governments. So finally, what does it take for this to be successful? A couple of things. Number one, we don't have to reinvent the wheels. There are existing African institutions, including mine, that need to be leveraged and empowered so we can fast-track implementation. And that's why the support that the European Union has provided to my organization just last week, 9 million euro, will go a long way in supporting a capacity building, a modeling of risk, a research and development, so we can actually help African government to transfer the risk. So the first thing that we need to be doing is supporting the existing initiatives. Second, we have to approach it from a holistic way. It's not just about risk transfer. It's also building capacities. I'm hoping in our intervention, we look at this from a very holistic approach as opposed to looking at piecemeal intervention. And last but not least, equally important, and that is gender. You look at across Africa, the most vulnerable people happen to be women. So whatever we do, if we don't put gender into the picture, we are missing the most important part of vulnerable communities. So mainstream gender and gender disaster management is absolutely important if you want to be successful. So my organization is committed to putting our work on the table, our experience, our track record, and make sure the 1 billion is put to use so we can be successful in Africa. So thank you.
Without wasting much time, allow me to call the acting DG to come and just give us a wrapping, concluding remarks quickly. I know people are pressed for time. Please, over to you, ma'am.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a fascinating discussion with very good prospects. So as we all know, the European partnership with Africa is a key priority for the European Union and its member states. We are and will remain at the forefront of the collective efforts to deliver on adaptation finance in Africa in a well-coordinated and effective manner. Let me stress that this Team Europe initiative can be a real game changer. It is a concrete example of our firm commitment to adaptation, and we want to inspire others to do the same. It will help the European Union and African partners to better assess climate risk, as we've been hearing once again, to reinforce early warning systems, so important for this adaptation policies. It will also be instrumental to mobilize international climate finance at scale, including the private sector, and to strengthen climate and disaster risk finance and insurance to protect vulnerable populations, including women. The European Union will not stop here. The climate finance target for the Commission's global instrument, NDDC Global Europe, has been raised to 35%. And through the Global Gateway, we intend to raise further investments for clean, secure, and climate resilience infrastructure. The Green Great Wall, which has been alluded to several times, which the EU and African Union Transboundary Water Management Initiative and Strategic Corridors, to name a few, are some of the other Team Europe initiatives ongoing. Member states present today have also many other ongoing projects, as we have heard. Yet, we know that public finance can never be enough to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. Increasing private finance is crucial and necessary supplement to reach the Paris goals. In light of the current crisis, it is essential that adaptation advances from currently incremental adjustments to planned and systemic approaches. It needs to anticipate and address the various climate change risks to better protect all populations. These aspects are being largely discussed in this COP. We have already made substantial progress on the global goal on adaptation, as well as on the Santiago network on loss and damage. But at the same time, most of the key decisions need still additional work in the coming days. So we trust we can achieve them together. Before I conclude, I would like to encourage all stakeholders, public and private, to join us in scaling up work on adaptation in Africa. And at the same time, let us remind ourselves that only together we can take the necessary action to stay below 1.5 degrees. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, DG. We'd like to thank all the panelists, your dignitaries, and all the audiences for your patience. We'd love to see you in our next action plan, where we'll be doing more and more work. Thank you very much.